Good morning and welcome to the Peorian. I'm your host, Paul Gordon. Last fall, some people were surprised when Caterpillar Chairman Doug Oberhelman said there was a serious lack of qualified workers that his company needed as it expanded its workforce. He said the jobs were there, but the available pool of workers wasn't ready for them, which is a dilemma he said many manufacturers are facing. What I did not understand at the time was why people were surprised by what Oberhelman said. This was not a revelation. Indeed, many experts predicted this would happen in Central Illinois once Caterpillar started trying to replace qualified workers as they retired. In 2001, a consultant commissioned to study Peoria's 21st century workforce needs predicted by now that there would be a shortage of thousands of qualified workers in Central Illinois. That was front page news a decade ago. The question now is, what can be done about it? Now, I don't mean just finding workers qualified for Caterpillar jobs, but for other technical jobs as well. Would a lack of technical training keep potential employers from locating here? Well, absolutely. That's why the Economic Development Council for Central Illinois is pushing for growth in career and technical education, or CTE programs. EDC President Vickie Clark calls it imperative. She's my guest today, and we'll talk about those programs when we come back. Welcome back to the Peorian. My guest today is Vickie Clark, President of the Economic Development Council for Central Illinois. Thank you for coming, Vickie.
Good to be here, Paul.
In a nutshell, there are jobs out there that require some special training, but there's not enough people who have or are getting that training. Am I right? Am I being too simple?
That's right. Right now we have over 200 manufacturing jobs that are available, that are open.
Just in Peoria?
Just in the Peoria region.
Okay.
Right.
And?
These are welders, they're CNC operators, and maintenance workers. And all of CNC operators is a special machinist that works on a computer and then sends messages to machines to make the right kind of parts that they want.
Okay. And there are just not enough people to fill these jobs, qualified to fill these jobs.
What we're starting to see nationwide is that there's a manufacturing resurgence.
Okay.
And for so many years, people thought that manufacturing was moving away from the U.S. and that manufacturing jobs would decline. Well, our specialized manufacturers, the manufacturers in this region that are more technology driven than your old school manufacturing, they've been realizing that we will have a workforce shortage for years. They were working with us at the EDC in a strategy group before the recession, and it's even more prevalent now.
Why?
Because jobs are starting to come back, and the manufacturers are coming back to the U.S., and they're looking to produce, build their inventory, and they're finding that they don't have the kind of skills in the workforce that they need because technology's changed.
Oh, okay. Well, what kind of specialized training are we talking about then?
It's mostly math skills and then mechanical skills that are needed. And if you look at the technology that has changed in the last 10 years, if you just think about, you and I use an iPad now. Our cell phones have changed dramatically. Computers have changed dramatically. Well, manufacturing technology has changed like that too. So the skill sets need to adapt quickly. And because people thought that manufacturing was going away, they weren't trained in those areas as much. So now we're saying we need those people to fill these jobs.
When you're, welders, everybody understands.
Sure.
What are some of the other jobs again then?
CNC operators, which are machinists. It's a specialized field. And then maintenance. Maintenance is not like it used to be. Maintenance is not sweeping the floor. Maintenance is not just using machines that typically,
a light bulb or something like that.
No, it is actually understanding that technology. It has to do a lot with robotics and the new technologies that manufacturers use. So people need to have those skill sets.
Do we have a lot of robotics in Peoria area?
We do in some of our manufacturers, and especially in auto. mechanics and things like that, they use robotics.
In the Peoria region, are we talking mostly Caterpillar and its suppliers, or are, at least in regards to the manufacturing sector?
Well, in manufacturing specifically, if you look at that field, in our region, it is mostly Caterpillar and suppliers of Caterpillar. Okay. We do, however, see an increasing manufacturing role in global manufacturing, and so some of our manufacturers aren't all Caterpillar anymore. A lot of them are building up their global manufacturing as well.
It was no surprise to you, I assume, last fall when Doug Oberhelman said that there is a serious shortage of qualified workers, not just in Peoria, but countrywide.
That's correct. EDC actually has had this specialized strategy group for specialized manufacturing, and Caterpillar came to us and said, we see this need. The specialized manufacturers, which are our suppliers and also supply globally, see this need. Is there some congruency where we can work together on this issue?
This strategy group you're talking about, who does it involve?
It has Illinois Central College. It has Perfect, which is the CTE group, the career and technical education group that works with high schools. It also has several specialized manufacturers from the area, EDC, and some of our public sector people.
Well, the focus was to figure out where the training is going to come from?
The focus is how are we going to be able to close this gap between the skills that we have now and the skills that we need to be able to fill these jobs.
No easy solution?
No easy solution. If you think about each of these sectors that have traditionally filled their workforce. Education has traditionally looked at filling a workforce pipeline a certain way. The state and the federal government has looked at a traditional policies to be able to supply grants and foundation dollars and things like that for the workforce that they need. Businesses are attracting workforce in a different manner than they used to. All of those need to be able to sync together so that we can be able to close these gaps.
Okay. When we come back, we're going to talk about the kinds of careers available that CTE programs would work for. Please stay tuned. Welcome back to the Peorian. I'm with Vickie Clark, President of the Economic Development Council for Central Illinois. Vickie, before we go on, you said in a recent news release that CTE programs were basically what we used to call shop classes.
True.
Well, that's when we were in school, of course. But isn't that oversimplifying? I mean, in shop class, I built a really, really bad pencil holder in wood shop.
Was that bad or good back then?
It was bad.
Okay.
Is that oversimplifying it to refer to it as that?
It is. CTE stands for Career and Technical Education.
Okay.
So back in our day, maybe it was shop classes or industrial arts or something like that, but now it's focused on the industry segments that are out there and the jobs that are out there. So the trades, the building trades has a CTE program, and so they try to train people that are interested in carpentry work and electrician work and things like that for that particular field. So CTE involves the co-op classes, internship programs, any kinds of fields where a student might want to go directly into a career, not necessarily go the college-bound path.
At the same time, they're taught basic skills as well, correct?
They are taught basic skills. They do their gen eds, if you would, the general education, but then they're taught specific skills that would be helpful in that particular pathway.
Such as?
Well, you talked about Caterpillar earlier. Caterpillar showed us an article that was done by the Harvard Business Review that was talking about pathways to prosperity. So when I talk about job paths, it's a pathway that chooses a career that's very specific. So manufacturing would be a career that would be driven for manufacturing. The skilled trades would go that route. Agriculture is another economy where people will go toward as well.
Any others?
Healthcare would be a newer one that's coming into the fold, but that's one that's in the works right now.
What kind of healthcare jobs would CTE?
It's preparing them for the right kind of basic skills that they need that are honed in more toward that career path. So they need to be able to look at, this is being developed right now, looking at what healthcare businesses need and what kind of skills and competency levels individuals need, and then it helps prepare them for that kind of career path.
We spent most of the first segment today talking about manufacturing sector needs. CTE, as you said, can do career path, but is it also a way to get your foot in the door at some places that then will expand the training beyond that?
It can be, absolutely, and companies are looking at this in a much stronger capacity right now. They know they need to fill that workforce, and if they can work with the schools to build almost like a very focused, skilled program, then they're ready for that job whenever it becomes open.
Is it the job of the EDC or the employer to communicate the employer's needs to the schools?
It is the job of all of us to work together. It's an ecosystem, and we need to have a healthy economic ecosystem in our region.
Can you go expand on that a little bit further?
Our ecosystem includes education, it includes families, it includes businesses, it includes agencies like ours and the government. And we all need to be able to work together because things are changing so quickly, we've got to be able to adapt.
You talked in one of the press releases about awareness of the public of the CTE programs. Is that what you're getting at, that the whole
That's
ecosystem?
part of it. The CTE program is a critical program because it looks at building our own workforce through the high schools. And it needs to be re-engaged and reinvigorated.
As opposed to, rather than being cut back, or as opposed to being ignored?
Well, a lot of the shop classes that we talked about,
yes,
a lot of those in some schools in the area, they just started reducing those. They thought manufacturing was going away. Now they need to reinvigorate those programs because manufacturing is here, it's growing, and we need to be able to grow that workforce.
Okay. We're going to take a break now for messages from our sponsors, and when we come back, we'll talk about what the EDC and other groups plan to do to increase CT programming in Central Illinois. But first, here is the Peorian's Kevin Kaiser to talk about what's going on in the literary and culinary world.
Hey, the 4th of July is almost here, and we have another fun-filled election coming up, so I thought I'd get a bit presidential this week with the book learning. And there are 2 new releases perfect for the political season. The first is called The President's Club by Nancy Gibbs and Michael Duffy. This book tells the complicated story of the world's most exclusive fraternity, the Presidency of the United States. It shows how sitting presidents and their predecessors have worked incredibly well together over the years. The first president was Harry Truman, who called upon Herbert Hoover to help reconfigure and streamline the way the government functions. Now, Hoover was a Republican, and the Republicans then, as now, had an irrational hatred of FDR, who of course preceded Truman. They saw this as their grand opportunity to roll back FDR's legacy. However, Hoover disappointed them immensely and perhaps unwittingly established a critical precedent that for the most part is held true to this day, that presidents protect the office no matter who holds it at the time. This has brought together men with massive political and sometimes personal grudges. Clinton and W are called the rascal and the rebel, while LBJ and Nixon were described as 2 scorpions in a bottle. Speaking of LBJ, that brings us to our second presidential book, this one entitled The Passage of Power, The Years of Lyndon Johnson by Robert Caro. This is the 4th installment in Caro's brilliant series on Lyndon Johnson and covers a few short but turbulent years, beginning shortly before the 1960 presidential election and ending a few months after an assassin's bullet vaulted LBJ into the presidency. It follows Johnson's rise and fall and re-rise. First, his rise to Congress to become known as the genius who ran Senate, then his fall into the vice presidency where he was used by JFK to win the South and then was discarded politically by the Kennedys who dubbed him Rufus Cornpone, and finally his re-rise to the presidency on that tragic November day. Caro's series will undoubtedly soften the image of LBJ, who's both a brilliant politician and a classic Texas storyteller who had a way with words. He once said the difference between a caucus and a cactus is that the pricks are on the outside of a cactus. So there you go, 2 new books about the presidency, The President's Club by Nancy Gibbs and Michael Duffy, and The Passage of Power, The Years of Lyndon Johnson by Robert Caro. 2 excellent new books that will get you primed for another political season. Available at places where printed things are sold to people who have money to exchange for them. See you next week, suckers.
I'm back talking with Vickie Clark, head of the EDC for Central Illinois, about the lack of qualified workers for many specialty jobs in this area and around the country. This is not a surprise, is it, Vickie, that we are facing this?
No, it's not a surprise. We've known for several years that the baby boomer generation would be retiring at some point and that there would be a workforce shortage in some cases. What we're finding is that combination with the fact that technology has changed so much in the last 10 years, combined with the fact that manufacturing is coming back more to the U.S., means that we have this perfect storm, if you will, of activity that means we need to do something and we need to be more adaptable and ready to make change than our systems, our traditional systems currently allow.
As the boomers retire, it's been said, as the boomers retire, they have to be replaced, and people don't have the skills necessary to replace them. Where did the boomers get the skills? They were already on the job. Were they trained on the job for these new technologies?
Yes, to a degree. If you think about our traditional workforce in a company, somebody would be hired in, they might push the broom for a while.
Okay.
They would be exposed to that environment and they would learn some things that were natural for them to learn. And then they would slowly move up the ranks and be able to attain the level of position that they would want. They'd stay with the company for years. Now technology has changed so much that the skill set isn't as gradual. It's moving rapidly, just like the iPads are changing, just like the cell phones are changing. It's changing so rapidly that our traditional systems aren't keeping up with the changes.
But again, the people who are already in the jobs have to be learning how to do the new technology.
Yes, but if you're losing your baby boomers to retirement, then you have people that are highly skilled and you have a gap that we need to fill.
And the companies would rather that they come in knowing at least the basics of the technology?
Companies are willing to be part of this ecosystem,
okay,
but they also need to be able to have the math skills growing up into the high school years, and they need to be able to have higher skills for people to fill these gaps because they're losing some of that expertise from the baby boomers that are retiring.
Like you said, we've seen this coming for years. I remember a decade ago when Richard Judy and Jane Lamel put out the report that said, you know, we're going to have a shortage of thousands in a decade. It's here.
It's here.
Maybe the shortage isn't in the thousands, but the shortage is here, and it's going to worsen. Why hasn't more been done to date, or am I being unfair in even asking that question?
I think that what we're seeing is an evolution that has happened in a much stronger way than we had originally anticipated. Absolutely, workforce development people, economic development people have been saying for years, we will have this gap at some point. The recession came, and it hit, and there was a lot of unemployment. And now we're past the recession. We still have unemployment. We still need to be able to fill those jobs, but we have some specialized jobs that have changed with technology that are not meeting the skill set that we need.
Didn't the recession point out, at least like at a company such as Caterpillar, that maybe there's still the gap, but maybe not as many people were needed? Didn't the recession at least do that?
Recession typically has an ebb and flow and you have changes in workforce. But when you're talking about the skill set, you need to be able to have people that are at the high school level that have the math skills that they need if we're talking about specifically manufacturing. And you need to be able to have people that have the soft skills that are willing to do the work and are interested in doing the work and in growing up that ladder.
What's a soft skill?
Soft skill is being to work on time, being to work every day, being flexible, being a lifelong learner, those types of things.
Some of the basic skills that we're talking about, besides mathematics and that sort of thing, communications is a big part of it also, right?
Certainly communications is critical. I would consider communications a basic skill.
Okay. How, and briefly, how will the local economy suffer if these problems aren't resolved?
For every job that we can't fill, it's an average of $30,000 to $50,000 that goes into the economy. When I translate that into what a company invests and the trickle effect that goes throughout the entire economy, 200 jobs is worth $141 million to our economy every year. It's really important to me in EDC's perspective to fill those jobs. And it's important to our parents to keep our students employed, and it's important to our businesses because we can attract new businesses here and we can keep those businesses if we have employees for them.
Okay. Thank you for joining us today.
Good to see you.
I hope you've enjoyed today's program and that we helped you learn more about career and technical education programs. Remember, you can see this and other episodes of The Peorian on our website, thepeorian.com, and tune in for another episode next Sunday at 8 a.m. on WHOI. Have a good week.
Thank you.